Hey guys, welcome back to Been There Too, Babe. I hope everybody's doing well. I hope everybody is warm, comfortable, happy, relaxed, and ready to just wind down for a little bit. Today we're going to be going over different relationships that you might have in your life, scenarios that those types of relationships create, and how you might want to go about dealing with them. So, like I talked about in the past episode, communication's key, communication is vital, communication is the backbone to human socialization. And one of the most important kinds of relationships to exercise communication is in your romantic relationships. Now, romantic relationships on their own, whether or not you can speak or not, they're a whole different ballgame in terms of the type of communicating that's going on and the type of emotions that are involved. So again, communicating is really about sharing your emotions, sharing your beliefs, expressing how you feel, and making sure that that is being properly conveyed to a separate party. Or if you're dealing with personal communication then with yourself, then you're making sure that, you know, what's happening on one side of your brain is being translated to the other. But with romantic relationships, you know, these relationships are, the foundation of them is an emotional connection, or it's strong emotions, whether, it's, some love at first sight, or if it's enemies to lovers, or if it's, mysterious type of, whatever type of romantic situation it is, the foundation of it is emotions, right? So, with that being said, it's really important that those emotions are properly being expressed to whoever it is that is your partner in that romantic relationship. Because we also got to consider that when you're in this type of relationship, your emotions are extremely heightened, and they're sometimes a little bit illogical, or they're not exactly what you might interpret them to be. Butterflies from nerves might be mistaken for excitement, or butterflies from excitement might be mistaken for nerves. Something they say might make you cry, whereas if your best friend said it to you, it would make you laugh. All of this plays into why romantic relationships are different from other relationships in our lives, right? So it's really important that if you ever are having some type of conflict with your partner, that you need to try to not put them on a pedestal, right? So like, we like to think of the people that we romantically involve ourselves with as a very desirable person. Like, they have something that we need, and it's something that can create a really big barrier when you're trying to understand how to navigate a situation that you are well aware of the facts and the situations that play into this conflict. And when you're trying to, understand what you're feeling, but then you're putting a constraint on yourself because you will maybe not try to put any blame on the other person, right? So you want to try by first taking them off of this pedestal and not looking at them as this prize, or something that's, they're not something that you want anymore, right? When conflict happens, they are your equal. They are just another person who you need to get through a situation with. Like, there's no way to win a battle that you feel strongly about when you are already giving another person the extra, like a 5-second head start. You can't do that, because then you're just setting yourself back, and then you're never going to be able to catch up. You're not going to win that race. So being straight up is one of the most important things you can do, because seeing them as your equal is one of the first steps to being able to communicate, because then you won't have that pressure or constraint on yourself feeling like you can't say something to this person because you think that they might, you know, receive it wrong, or they're too good for you that you can't say something that might upset them or make them think that they upset you. When conflict happens and you're trying to communicate, you are doing it for yourself. You're doing it to make sure that this situation allows you to come out on top. It allows you to be left with the best situation possible. And if you both can't be there, at least you can be. Because what are you doing putting somebody else ahead of you and making sure that they're all good when they're the only reason that you're not all good, or they're the only reason that you're not where you should be? You know, there's no reason to ever let somebody ahead of you for the hell of it, you know? So always try to give yourself that equal starting field, and that way, if you do decide to communicate, at least you're starting off on the same page. You know, you're starting off on the same level, and you're not self-sabotaging yourself before you even give yourself the chance to defend yourself, or giving yourself the chance to defend your emotions and how you're feeling and what your thought process is. The earlier on that you start to communicate your feelings and how somebody's behavior is making you feel, the sooner that their actions will be put to a halt, the sooner that they will stop exhibiting a behavior that makes you feel negative emotions, right? So if that barrier, or if that boundary is already set in stone before proceeding on in the relationship, then you're setting yourself up for more success, because you're not going to be dealing with the same things that are constantly making you upset or constantly making you feel like you have no voice in that relationship. So it's always, always, always better to say something rather than staying silent. In my past relationship, I really put my ex-boyfriend to this higher standing. You know, I loved him so much, and I was obsessed with everything about him, and I thought he was great. And anytime that we argued, I never wanted to make him feel like he was in the wrong. I never wanted to make him feel like he had done something to hurt me, even if he did. And after a while, that behavior, like my own behavior and my own actions, started to make me feel really lonely in the relationship. I felt like my boyfriend didn't know me, and I was in a relationship with someone who wouldn't understand what made me happy, what made me sad, what made me mad, what made me confused, because I had never clearly communicated to him what it was that I liked or didn't like, because I didn't want him to think that anything he did was particularly wrong or upsetting. You know, I didn't want him to think that he could ever do something that would be not favorable. And obviously, looking back on that, that's very silly to think, but it's the case for a lot of people. And a lot of people in relationships, even though I'm a girl, this goes the same for guys, where, you know, they will have a girlfriend who they love so much, and she maybe doesn't treat them the best, or doesn't always make his, you know, wants a priority. And that's a problem too. That's a problem that needs to be communicated on both ends. Okay, why are her wants more important than his? And why should he have to, you know, constantly be the one putting up with her drama when she can't reciprocate that? It could go for any type of romantic relationship, any type of situation where you're romantically involved with someone and something is going on. The sooner you say something, the better off you will be. You will be able to feel fulfilled, because your relationship will be in alignment with what you need and what you want and what you're expecting. But you have to give that person the chance to do that for you. You know, way too many times I'm hearing people complaining about their relationships, or upset by something that their significant other does or did or keeps doing, or won't stop doing. And I'll ask them, did you talk to them about it? Did you make it clear? Oh, yeah, I mean, I mentioned it this one time, or, one time we were drinking and he said something and I didn't like it and I kind of got upset, but that's it. What do you expect is going to happen? Who is going to change their behavior after a soft complaint, It has to be something where it's clear and organized and understandable. And that way, you both are given the opportunity to treat each other correctly. There's always going to be some type of conflict in any relationship. And honestly, anything that I just said can apply to anything I'm about to say. But I think that romantic relationships specifically really do have a lot to do with the communication of emotions. I think that's the biggest part, just because, like I said, romantic relationships are built on emotions. They're based on emotional logic, emotional actions, emotional behavior, emotional everything. And that is why your communication must be centered around your emotions when you're dealing with a partner. Now, on the other hand, let's talk about workplace relationships. So, in the workplace, you got to be a little bit careful. And you also have to try to be less emotional if possible, right? So, in the workplace, you're working as a worker, you're there on your own terms. You need a job, you found your job, and you wanted it, you accepted it, it's your own doing, right? So you're there because you can offer a service in exchange for money. You're there because you have a skill that is needed, and in exchange for that skill, you're going to get a coin, right? So when it comes to communication, you need to be highly expressive of why your issue is preventing you from believing that that trade-off is no longer worth it. Of course, in extreme examples, that would be the case. I guess if it's something smaller, or if you're having an issue where it's really just bothering you and you need something fixed, your communication is still, you're still trying to bring yourself up and make yourself seem like, without this being fixed, you're going to lose something valuable. But a lot of it has to do with explaining the rules and principles of what is wrong with that situation, okay? So let me explain this a little bit better here. So when you're trying to, go to a manager, go to a boss about a situation, maybe with a coworker, somebody's pissing you off and you just can't deal with it, you don't want to deal with it anymore. You're never trying to really make it seem like, oh, this person is doing this and I'm better than them, so you need to get rid of them, or, you need to punish them. It's never like a you need to do this. But you can always have a conversation and remind your boss and remind your managers and whoever's in charge that every building has standards, every organization has a way of doing things. And a lot of the processes and ways that businesses are set up will have a section on, workplace environment and community and what is expected of coworkers. And if somebody is preventing you from either doing your job or doing it to your fullest capacity, you need to communicate that. You need to communicate the fact that somebody else's actions is preventing the job from being done. It should never be somebody else's actions are hurting my feelings. That's not a strong argument, and that's not what is necessarily the most important part of the conflict to resolve. Like, yes, somebody might be making you so miserable and so down bad at work to the point where you are so upset that you don't even want to show up to work, or you don't want to be around this person. But in the end, what that means is that you are unable to complete the job. And that is why communicating that aspect of it to managers or to bosses when you do decide to go over that situation with them, that is what you need to highlight, because it will allow you a chance to regain some control. It's going to regain your control over your position, over the time that you spend there, the effort that you're putting into the work that you do there, and the money that you're gaining. You know, if you figure out your situation and you get things sorted out, then your money feels worth it again. Your time spent there feels worth it again. Your position doesn't feel as bad or as useless, and your effort there means something to you. It also really helps clarify what you're expecting out of your employers, especially depending on how long you're there. It's not a crime to ask from something in return that's more than money. You know, sometimes our effort and the favors that we give our bosses require more compensation than your typical paycheck. You know, when people do overtime, there's a reason there's overtime payments, is because that is time and effort that's not equivalent to what is normally being offered, right? So when you're doing that, you're able to put yourself in a much better position than you were to be in if you had left that situation alone. And it also clarifies with your higher ups what you're expecting from this work experience and from this work environment. And, you know, if it's something that they made clear to you that you are not supposed to be experiencing any type of harassment or bullying or anything of that nature by another coworker or employee, then, you know, clarifying and being transparent about what you're going through and how it's affecting you and how it ultimately is affecting them is a very important skill that is not only necessary to be able to exercise, but it's something that should be important to you in general. You know, you should always be trying to, you know, you always want to make sure that what you're doing and the time that you're spending and the effort that you're spending on whatever it may be is worth it. And when it's not worth it anymore, you need to do something to make it worth it for you again. Nobody's going to do that for you. A little example I have of this is I did bottle service at the bar I work at, and I hadn't gotten paid for it the night of like I usually do. And my manager had told me that this was on a Saturday night. He told me I would get the payment Sunday morning, so the next day, right? A week goes by and I didn't get my payment. And it wasn't necessarily the money that was the problem. It was more about the fact that this was something that was unusual and hadn't happened before. So after another week went by and, you know, me and my coworker who had worked it together were getting a little bit frustrated with this fact. We had reached out to him and had asked him, you know, what's going on with the money? Where is it? When are we going to see it? My manager basically reached back out and said, oh, you'll get it tomorrow. Next day comes, we didn't get it. We asked again, oh, you'll get it tomorrow again. Still no payment. So I reached out to him and I had asked him, hey, what's going on with this? Why is the money not being handled the way it usually does? You know, my issue is not with getting this payment or how much of the payment I'm getting. It's about the fact that this is out of the ordinary for what I'm used to, and you're not being very clear or straight up with me or my coworker about this money. And he ultimately explained that it's because of the way this payment was done. It had to go through different people, and he didn't have access to the money for a while. He needed the go-ahead from my boss to understand, okay, this person's getting this much, this person's getting that much. But it wasn't until I had brought it up that I was able to get that satisfaction. And it wasn't until I brought it up that I was able to understand how the money was going to be split, why it was going to be split that way, and who it was going to for which jobs that they did. And this was something that I made clear to him that it wasn't something typical that we do in that building, right? It's not something standard. It wasn't the correct payment process. I had never experienced something like that. And that is exactly why I went to him and I said, hey, this isn't how we do things here. Even though I'm not the one in charge, I'm still a part of that building. I'm still a part of that team. So when I'm held to a certain standard that you preach to me and you're not upholding to that standard, then it becomes a we thing because you're not doing something that we are supposed to do. So I basically told him, I was like, I don't understand why it's like this and why you can't be transparent about it. And he did apologize and ended up explaining that, it was something out of the ordinary and he understood where I was coming from. But again, that wasn't going to be something that I was ever going to get unless I went to him and explained to him that this isn't right. It's not something that I necessarily want to deal with as a employee of yours, and it needs to be fixed because I'm not going to put up with something that's stressing me out like this for no reason. I've never had to put up with it before, and I'm not going to start now. And that was that situation handled, and now I'm happily paid. There's always going to be some type of discomfort going on in any situation where there's conflict. Okay? Nothing about conflict is favorable or desirable. And the people who like to fight don't actually like to fight. They just want somebody to care and show them that they have emotions towards them. But nobody wants to have an argument and nobody wants to feel a pit in their stomach because something isn't right with a friend of theirs, a manager of theirs, a relationship that they're having. Nobody wants to walk around feeling like something's off, right? The most important thing you can ever do to get that pit out of your stomach is get the words that are sitting in your stomach out of your mouth and into the ears of the person that you're trying to deal with, right? You need to get that out. You need to let people know how you're feeling. You need to understand how you're feeling. And that is what I'll be talking about in the next episode, actually, is how you could sort of try to analyze how you're feeling and understand your thought process so that you can properly get it out of your mouth in a way that's not rude, snarky, snappy, bratty, all of those things. And you can be understood and have your issues and complaints taken seriously, be accepted, revised, fixed, and be sent on your way with the end result that you were hoping for.